Welcome to the Sovereign Sisterhood Movement podcast, where we unite as a global community dedicated to breaking generational cycles of trauma, reclaiming our sovereignty, and building a legacy. Today's episode with my co host and sis, Elvira, is all about healing the inner child, generational trauma work. And it is a very profound invitation to reconnect with that tender, innocent, beautiful part of ourselves that perhaps through patterns of generational trauma may still carry wounds of the past. Together, we're going to explore this concept of the inner child, how generational trauma impacts it, and how healing this aspect of ourselves transforms not only our lives, but also the lives of those who came before and after us. How are you, Elvira? Happy and blessed, beautiful day to you.
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. It was a crazy week. I was just sharing with you some of the stuff that I've been through on this week and all over the place. And then we come together today to talk about such a profound subject that I feel that this is something that will help so many women, but also whenever we do speak on this, because this is one of my favorite subjects to talk about, the inner child, it almost feels liberating even for me. Don't you think?
It definitely is. I think we're all living life and responding to life through our inner child, unless we become aware what's actually happening, and then we could navigate it a little bit better.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, the awareness. And I think we can definitely start there because a lot of us feel very, very uncomfortable in being who we are, in having the confidence to speak our truth, even setting boundaries, what we were talking about last week. So go check out that podcast episode on boundaries if you struggle with that. And we don't necessarily correlate it to our childhood experiences, whether that's because we don't want to act like victims or it's almost like what we were talking about last week, where we were, that whole blood is thicker than water. And I don't know, for a while, I didn't even want to bring these things up because I almost even felt guilty for blaming my parents or blaming my childhood for the way I was today. It almost felt like I was just being lazy about it. But the truth is that the more that I got into this work, the more that I realized that our childhood experiences absolutely make an impact in our adult life. And there was this one philosopher who said, show me the child between the ages of 0 to 7, and I will show you the adult. And we're coming into the society where I think more and more people are putting the puzzle pieces together. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that this is something that a lot of women are even aware that they have as a challenging aspect of who they are?
I think more women are becoming aware because I'm meeting them, or I start having conversations with them where I could see the aha moment in them where they're like, oh, this is why. And I've had people tell me that they're actually resonating a lot in regards to what we're speaking about, because they're starting to understand themselves a little bit more. And a lot of us have the same similarities about how we were raised and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I do see some who are very resistant to looking at their inner child, or they don't, or maybe they just don't want to relive that part of their life because it's too painful. So they keep replaying, because I do see it. I do see how people's reactions are now. I see little girls, like grown women who are in their 70s, and they get angry. Like, I literally know someone who does that, and she will pout and cross her arms, kind of like a little girl throwing a fit, like she's not getting her way. But I do see it in myself a lot too, how there's certain stuff that happened in my childhood that now happens, that I'll revert back to that little girl.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the perfect way to describe it, and the way I see it too, reverting back to that little girl, but to that little girl who's scared.
Mm.
Because the way I see the inner child, and let me know what you think of this definition, but to me, it represents this part of ourselves that does retain these feelings and experiences that are traumatic, that perhaps there was like abuse, right? Physical abuse, emotional abuse, all kinds of other abuse that exists, right? Perhaps there was neglect, like we've talked about here, abandonment. So it's another podcast episode to go check out if it's something that you're struggling with, because when we grow up with a parent who is depressed herself or has gone through all this trauma herself or him, right? Mom or dad, they, as much as they want to be there for us, they can't because of their own pain, which then causes our inner child, which is this person who we were between, especially the ages of 0 to 7, when our brain is still developing, to create all these beliefs about how we're not good enough, how we are not worthy, how we are broken. So when I look at the inner child, and especially from the studies I've done, it's both a psychological concept, but it's also a spiritual concept because what it does is that unresolved trauma, like again, being raised by parents that were not present, they were addicted, maybe they were not even there physically, right? All of that shapes our own subconscious beliefs about the life, about the world, behaviors, our physical health. And what's interesting now is epigenetics, they prove how emotional pain and survival patterns can be passed down biologically. And people, I think, don't understand that. They think, well, my mom, think about your grandma. If she went through a lot of trauma, how did she respond to that? How did she survive through it? Those responses become programs in mom. And then in you, especially if mom's raising you the same way that her mom did. And it's not a choice many times, a conscious choice. It's an unconscious choice where then we grow up to be adults and we wonder why we have such high levels of anxiety, why we don't trust people, why we feel depressed or anxious. So I think that, how would you say, for someone who has never heard about the inner child concept, how would you say would be the easiest way to navigate it through awareness and compassion so that they don't feel like they're necessarily like blaming? It's just almost like we're just stating a fact.
We need to become aware of our thoughts and our reactions, our responses, because that's what I had to do. I don't know how you became aware of it, but with me, when me and my husband were on the verge of divorce and we came back together to work things out, we were very aware that if we couldn't make it work this time around, that was it. So we were very careful to really make it work. And so I had to become very aware of myself. Obviously, it started with my sadhana practice. I was very committed to it. And I think because I made the time to actually sit and meditate and really be in my thoughts and my feelings, that all of a sudden, everything just started coming up, what we call in our coaching group, the dark nights of the soul. That's like the best way we could describe it, where I'm just becoming aware of so many things. But it came to a point, for instance, if my husband did something that bothered me, I would have to sit down and be like, okay, why are you upset, Elvira? Like, why? What's going on? What's going in your head? And I would have to really think about, okay, you're upset because of this. Was it really his fault? Did he do that on purpose? Was he trying to be mean to you? No, he wasn't. It was not under his control. He was not trying to be mean. He was not trying to ignore you. So calm down. I would have to dissect my whole thinking process and how I was feeling, what was going through my head, to come to, okay, it's not his fault, to calm down. There's no reason for you to be upset. But I do realize now how it comes from being ignored as a child, people not paying attention to my feelings or my wants, my needs, whatever. And I do see how it passes down through our family lineage unconsciously. Just like when me and my husband would fight, my mind automatically goes, we're going to get divorced. He's going to leave. I'm going to end up alone. He's going to remarry. And it's everything that happened to my grandmother. And we just unconsciously keep reliving or repeating these patterns. And we're not even aware. We have to become aware why we're feeling what we're feeling and question it if it's really even valid. Because a lot of times I realized it wasn't valid for me to be upset over something my husband did because it wasn't even his fault. Like it just you revert to that little girl, like I'm being ignored again, and it's like no, it's not. And like I said, like you said, sometimes our parents they didn't know either. They were unconscious. They weren't aware. They were just going through whatever dealing the best they could, however they knew how.
Yeah. And it goes back to awareness, what you're talking about. And the whole thing about awareness is there's a quote that says, you don't know what you don't know. And the thing about childhood trauma, so childhood trauma doesn't necessarily mean it just came from your parents, too. I mean, it could have come from school.
Mhm.
There, there's so much talk now about abuse from child to child. Bullies, there's a reason that they are the way they are. But the whole thing about childhood trauma that I think people need to understand is that it affects our nervous system in a very huge way. It's really sad to me because sometimes this is a never ending story. What I mean by that is what you just described so beautifully growing up with a parent who's been depressed or growing up with a parent who's not emotionally there, you don't feel seen. You feel like you're not worthy, like you don't, something's terribly wrong with you. And it gets even sadder, I think, for people because then you grow up to be an adult and the parents still are acting that way. They still don't see you. In fact, most people, the people that know how to live right, they age well. They're beautiful older ancestors. But the problem is in our society, in Mexico, it used to be like that. We used to respect the elders. They sat around and listened to their stories. Now, I don't know about you. I feel like the elders are getting worse and worse because their nervous systems are completely wrecked because of the telephone consumption. That messes with your brain a lot. And because they haven't dealt with their generational trauma. Well, then that creates a really, so think about you being in a meeting, let's say a work meeting, and you're having a work meeting and there's a girl across the street who all of a sudden starts crossing her hands and putting her pouty face and just making your life miserable, literally acting like a child. And the sad part is that if we don't do this healing journey, and then you still also have parents that didn't heal as an adult, it's war, World War III within you. It is hell, living in hell because of the frustration and resistance. I think so many of us as women say, I will never be like my parents. I will never do those things that they did to me. But yet, when we haven't dealt with our own healing and our own inner child and our own stopping betraying ourselves, which is what we talked about last week with boundaries, it doesn't matter how old you get. It only gets worse and worse. And you would think these people are getting older. They should mature out finally. And it's their pain, that inner child that has never been cradled. I don't know. What is your experience then?
Exactly the same. Just like I said last week, the way I was living life before, it was hell. And I was creating it. And I didn't even realize because I hadn't dealt with my childhood. I always put my feelings to the side, had no boundaries, people pleaser, trying to be what everybody I thought wanted them for me to be, and completely ignoring myself and what made me happy or what I needed until I had to really take the time. And I really feel my son helped me with that. And then dissecting my thought pattern. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I thinking this way? Where is this coming from? Sometimes I didn't know. It just happened just like the other day when we were talking about my thought pattern of when me and my husband fight. That was coming from like my grandmother, since my grandmother, and unconsciously I was playing this narrative in my head. So it just and I see it unfortunately with my parents. They're more anxious as they're getting older. And I saw it in myself too, where my nervous system was, forget it. Anything bad would happen, I would lose my mind. Even this year has been with some issues coming up with me and my family. And if I hadn't calmed my nervous system down, if I didn't have my son up pregnant, if I hadn't started this work, I was telling my kids, I would be losing my mind right now. I would be crawled up in the ball in a corner, just losing it. God would has been preparing me for years to get to this point. Otherwise, I would be losing. I would be probably worse than my parents, I think,
Oh,
because
yeah.
we're repeating, we're carrying so much, so much. And I think we love them so much that a lot of times we carry even their pain
Oh, yeah.
besides our pain. So it gets even, so they're probably carrying their parents or their ancestors. And unconsciously, they don't even know we're all hauling this heaviness until we decide to look in the mirror and take responsibility and heal and work through it and learn a new way.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you're saying about awareness. And the reason why you have more awareness is because you worked on the nervous system. Because if we don't work on the nervous system, the way I used to live my life was just like I'm a victim and I was angry at everybody and I was trying to control everyone. That was my inner child. The frustration of my inner child, what she couldn't do when she was little, say what she wanted to say when she was little. As an adult, I was like, you're going to get it.
Yeah. You're going to hear me. I'm really going to control everything that goes on in the house, and you're going to do as I say. And then you get even worse than our parents.
Right. And I thought I was like I was a nice little girl, but it's how the world ends up being. I married my husband, and then I found out that one of his cousins, him and I went to like first and second grade together and third grade together. And then we were at a family reunion. He doesn't live here, he lives in California, so we don't see him a lot. But we were at a family reunion, and he's like, you were a mean little girl. I was like, what? I'm like, I was the nicest little girl that I would stand with everybody. He's like, no, you were mean. You were mean to me. And I was like, really? Like, even to boys? You have this whole story, but it makes sense to me because I was struggling so much. My mom, especially as between first, second, and third grade, I was very angry during those times because my aunt had just died, and that's my mom's peak of depression, like severe depression. And that made sense what he said to me. So instead of taking it personal, because he said it when a time when I had already started doing my healing work, and I was like, dude, I was mean. And I'm still mean. I quit all- By the same token, I was like, you're just weak, okay?
You know
But
what? That's what you just said right now, that you could actually look back and be like, you know what I did? And you probably maybe apologize to him. This actually happened to me this week where somebody was saying, a family person was telling me how her and some of my cousins were having the discussion and they were talking about me and somebody else. And I'm like, okay, I guess, but something that I had said, which seemed kind of mean to me. So I went directly to the person that I was talking about. I went directly to them. I said, look, they're saying that I said this. I just want to tell you, I don't remember saying this. I don't know why I would say this. I just want to apologize to you. If I did say this, I am sorry. It wasn't meant to hurt you in any way. And I think that's very important when we start this healing journey and seeing our inner child, because a lot of times we weren't even aware of what it's all the awareness. We're not even aware sometimes of the things that we do or we say until somebody points it out and they're like, oh, wow,
yeah.
I had no idea. I had no idea what's coming off this way.
And look at the way you responded though with maturity. If we wouldn't do this healing work, I would have taken that personal. I would have been angry at the other person, and I definitely would not have apologized.
I would deny it.
Exactly.
I don't know what you're talking about. I never said that.
And
Get over it.
that's how how children work. And that's what we're talking about last week, boundaries. When people break your boundaries, they're acting out of their pain. That's their inner child. That's what still haven't resolved. One of the things that I love about the Course in Miracles was also the sadness practice, the meditation for me. I agree with you 1,000%. Like it helped me rewire my nervous system. So basically, I was always under fight and flight, like always thinking I'm being attacked, always thinking the shoe's gonna drop. And literally, that's what I was creating in my life. My life was very chaotic. Shit was always happening. Like, it's not that shit doesn't happen now. It's just that I don't see it as chaotic. I have the nervous system regulation to come to life. I still have emotions. This week we had it, like I was sharing with you, we had a bit of a scare with my dad going into the hospital. And I was like, whoa, like all my stuff came up and I cried. But I mean, like you said, if it would have been me even 5 years ago, I would have probably been in a corner crying and just like feeling guilty and thinking that it's all my fault and all these other things. So we're not trying to say don't have emotions. That's not what we're saying. What I'm saying, I think, is when I worked with my meditation practice, my nervous system came out of that fight and flight so that I didn't react so much to life because the inner child, some of the symptoms, I guess you would call it, is toxic relationship patterns, right? Addiction, depression, anxiety. Why? Because you were never seen as a child, so you don't feel seen as an adult, so you don't feel safe in your body. Your nervous system is constantly under fight and flight. Your brain is doesn't process the information. For some people, it could just look like a small shadow. For you, it's like the devil right in front of you, you know? That's why as our parents get older and older, if they don't work on their nervous systems, it's not gonna get easier. It's gonna get worse unless they also have a very good relationship with God. Like maybe they pray a lot. That's also a great way of healing, or with Jesus Christ, they have a relationship with Yeshua. That's also a great way of healing. But for me, the Course in Miracles really helped me understand this because there's a section of the Course that it talks about shadow figures. Remember, we were talking about that for a while? Yeah. Shadow figures, how basically, okay, the people that hurt you the most, these Judas, or maybe it was your parents who couldn't be there for you, right? Those people, when we don't do the work of forgiveness, and you don't have to know how to forgive, all you have to be is willing to see things differently because God finishes the work of forgiveness. We can't physically in this realm forgive, it's impossible. It does require intervention from the Holy Spirit, from God, right? But when we have a broken inner child, we don't have a good relationship with God. We feel judged by the world, so we feel judged by God. We think God is this man that sits on a chair and all day he's mad at us, especially mad at us because why are we holding resentment towards our parents when that's something that you should never do? But when I went on this journey, I realized that those people that I thought had hurt me the most, it's these shadow figures, they just duplicated themselves in everyone else around me. It was my clients, it was my parent, it was the people that I saw at the car wash, the people that it was always like the same triggers over and over again because I hadn't dealt with this unresolved pain. So when I made the discovery that I was never going to be able to change my parents, that I was never going to be able to change the people around me that I thought were the problem, that's when I began my path of, you know what, I'm willing to see things differently. I'm willing to see my childhood differently. I'm willing, I don't know how you're going to do this, God, but you're going to help me because the Course says that every prayer we put always gets answered. So as I started doing that path of forgiveness, I was like, less and less these shadow figures kept showing up. And again, even our brother Jesus Christ had to be faced with the people that wanted to crucify him, right? Even the stuff that happens now, I'm just much more calm. I'm mature. I'm not acting out of a place of insecurity, out of pain, out of fear, because I think when you look at it, that's what the inner child is. It's just someone who's acting completely out of.
Yeah, I think everybody has gone through some form of it in different levels or whatever. Cause I see it in people all the time, even myself with family. Just like the Course says, changing our perspective and understanding. For me, what's helped me is in my childhood, my Judases, whatever, it has all prepared me to become the person that I needed to become and become a better mother, a better spouse, a better friend. Because whatever they did or whatever hurt me, they taught me what I'm not supposed to do, and in turn taught me what I should be doing. It could be very difficult and painful, even accepting it or forgiveness. Everybody's acting out of their own inner child. Unfortunately, some people get stuck. A lot of times it's our elders, they get stuck in that and they never heal that. Unfortunately, we have compassion for them. And at times, like we said in boundaries, unfortunately, sometimes we need to set certain boundaries because at the end of the day, it does still affect us maybe physically or emotionally, where we're not, as much as we're trying to do better or whatever, we're not 100% there to be able to accept that's how it is. That's how they are or whatever. They're not capable. Maybe it's not even that they're not willing. They're not just capable of healing that inner child. And it's fine. We have to accept it. God's plan is perfect and we need to trust. And that's something that God has been teaching me, I think, all our lifetime, but especially with me this year. He's like, no, I need for you to trust me 100%. I have a plan and my plan is perfect. And I know why I'm doing this. It's kind of like that meme that pops up. There's this guy, he's reading the script of why God's plan. And he's like, why? And he turns the page like, why? And he turns the page is like, oh, that's why. He has a plan and we have to trust it. And we have to, it comes from us at the end of the day. We have to be willing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some people, they're not capable of it just yet. And that's fine. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that I've been learning through the last 4 days. I was in this origins and identity class for the Kundalini yoga therapist certification program, and that was the one thing that was like driven in our head. Like, you truly want to help others, like you have to allow them to move through their own soul journey, whatever that is. You cannot, if you get the attitude of saving others, and I used to do this, I was at fault, especially when I first found Kundalini yoga. I wanted everybody to practice it.
Yeah.
I wanted everybody to heal. And the more that I pushed it onto people, especially like my parents and stuff like that, the more that they rejected it and the more that they talked shit about it too. Like they were just like, what are you doing now? What are you doing? So the one thing that I feel that this inner child healing journey has given me is that faith and trust in God to allow others to move through their experience and to know that the only thing I can do is live my life and be authentically me. And that in itself will be the example or the avenue to show others what's possible for them. But we can't, I truly do believe in my heart that 7 generations before and after are healed when we heal ourselves. Do we always see it in the physical realm? No. But I do believe that happens in the spiritual realm. And I think that we need to be more honest as a society about how bad our inner child for so many people need healing.
Yeah.
Because the one doctor that I trust a lot that has been doing this work for a while, I mean, he's been in this work for 50 years, but now it's coming to mainstream, is Gabor Mate, the one that we always talk about. And he's very, like, he has science behind this. And he talks about often how these wounds, they stem from all of our unmet needs for connection, safety, and unconditional love. And he, at one point, was working with homeless, very addicted people. And he said, all of these people have the same commonality. They have horrific childhood stories. No one just becomes an addict. It's not why the addiction, it's why the pain.
Yes.
And a big part of this, I know for me, was growing up in a household where we're from Mexico. You don't say these things. You don't say it was my childhood. In fact, I remember one time when I told my mom that when I first began on my journey, I was like, these are the things that happened that made me this way. And she's like, that's loca. That's loca.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I mean, you're crazy. Or my dad was like, I had the same childhood. Look at me. I'm more than okay. I go, Dad, are you serious right now? Are you serious? So again, in our culture, it was almost like this is not real. Depression is not real. Anxiety is not real. Get over it. You need to honor your parents. And maybe that first time when I told her, or maybe I came from a place of like accusation. I didn't feel like it, but maybe because I know that if you come from a place of love, they'll listen to you. Now my mom on her own, because she sees these videos, Gabor Mate and all that. She's like, well, you know what? Maybe when you were little, I shouldn't have, done that. Or maybe little things. And I don't need that from her anymore. I don't need her to say she's sorry. I don't need any of that. It's just, I think it's reflectory of what happens when you let go and stop trying to control and you focus on you. And the only thing you can change, which is you, your perception of what you think your childhood was. Because the other thing that Gabor Mate always says that I think is brilliant is that trauma is not what happened to you. It's what happens inside of you. And when he said that, I was like, oh, that's what the Course in Miracles says about the ego. So it's not the actual experience that's traumatic. It's all of these identities that we develop because of the experience. So you go through a traumatic experience, traumatic childhood. What are the identities that are developed? I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm a sinner. I'm all these other things, right? And the healing journey for me, I don't know about you, has been about releasing these identities and about knowing who I am with or without the experiences and about looking at my past and through the nervous system regulation, meditation, through A Course in Miracles and saying, what happened was not because of my worth. what happened was because of the level of pain of that human being. Took time, but that's what allowed me to finally liberate myself from these identities.
Yeah. I had a family member ask me one time, why is my sibling like this? I'm like, well, I think it's because of this or this and that. And she's like, but why only her? All of my brothers and sisters, all myself, we went through the same thing. We experienced the same thing. Why was she the only one that responded this way and became this person who she is now? But it's like you said, what happened internally? It's not what happened. It's what happened internally, how it affected them internally. The other day, too, when I was speaking to a family member and she was telling me how they were criticizing somebody else in regards to how they were a parent to their children. And, I'm thinking later, why are we criticizing? Like, why is this person criticizing this other mother when they haven't been a mother perfect themselves, where they made mistakes, where their own children made these different they took these different paths or because of how they were mothered. So it brought back full circle the Course in Miracles, how we're not supposed to judge. If anything, we're supposed to have more compassion for each other because we all make mistakes and we're not all perfect. My kids can tell you stuff that I did as a mother where, people can tell me, oh, you did such a good job. Yes, but talk to my kids. They'll tell you, remember that one time mommy yelled at us because of this? Or remember that one time? And I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like that. But it's just having more compassion for each other because we all go through stuff. Unfortunately, like what you said right now with people with addictions, it's difficult to do the healing work, but that's how we see how necessary it is. Because would you rather be living in this hell or go through the pain of this healing journey to not keep repeating the same thing, the same story over and over again? Because that is more painful to me than what we're doing now. This can be painful because we have to look at ourselves and accept our light and our darkness and accept and acknowledge where we have made mistakes and give ourselves credit for the work that we have done right. But I'd rather do that than to be in that because we have a responsibility. Like I said in one of the videos about ascending to God, we need to do this work and every generation needs to do better. So we keep ascending higher and higher to God so we could finally reach that level that we're supposed to reach, not just for ourselves, for our kids, our grandkids, the future lineage. That's what when you say, when you do the healing work and you heal it, you heal 7 generations before and 7 generations after. Of course you do, because you're teaching our children something else, and then they're teaching their children something else, and they keep doing the work. And every generation keeps doing the work where they're healing and they're just ascending higher to Him.
Yeah. It was like that lady that you saw, you were talking to us about with her husband,
Yeah.
how that she had that beautiful relationship and he transitioned. How much healing had to happen through that lineage for her to
Yeah.
experience that. And that's how this 1,000% works. And there was another thing that I heard about addiction too, that the children that are addictive as adults, like they're looked at as the black sheep. But to be honest, they are actually the brave ones because they're the ones that are showing where there's something really wrong in the family.
Yes.
So when I was going through my addiction of alcohol, I mean, I drank every day. It was not like I was drinking in the morning or anything like that, but I drank every day. That was a way for me to cope with life. And it was me not being able to talk about my pain. It was me showing what happens in generational trauma. Let's just tuck it under the rug, pretend it's not there. And that's infuriating because if you were not seen as a child and then as an adult, you still are not seen or heard, that gave me physical diseases.
Yeah.
I had a complete burnout where I had to leave the real estate industry. No, I took like a month off because I went from I talked to everybody and everything's fine to complete crash of my nervous system. And then I realized, hey, you know what? I'm putting my energy in the wrong place. I need to turn this around on and focus on me. Because that's another thing that happens with the inner child healing. You become a people pleaser. You put everyone else in front. You don't set boundaries. So then what happens? You get deeper and deeper into the hole. And we are literally now, I realize it because I have done so much of this healing. Like, there's so many adults that walk around like broken inner children all day. And I've been able to now do what you are saying, which is just offer the compassion, not take it personal. Of course, if I need to set the boundaries, I need to be said, need to be said, right? But knowing that I used to act out of that place and knowing that's what they're doing and knowing that I don't have to take their gifts and I don't have to accept whatever identity they're trying to throw at me. Because again, even our brother Jesus Christ was persecuted, right? That has been so empowering because that has taught me, first of all, how not to abandon myself and not to betray myself, because that's why our inner child feels lost and broken. And number two, how to also trust myself without guilt, do things that are going to honor her, because for how many years did I forget about her? And for how many years did I just completely disregard what she was feeling through? What has been your experience about that? Do you feel now that you don't abandon her as much, or what does that relationship look like for you?
I think especially with my boundaries, that's where I've constantly had to tell myself, I am deserving of peace. I am deserving of taking care of myself, of looking out for myself in regards to my mental health, my physical health, my spiritual health. I am worthy of that. I know lately I've been telling myself, because I always tell God, thank you for your divine protection, for your divine love. Lately, I've been telling myself, thank you, God, for you fill me up with your divine love. You fill me up with your divine light. You fill me up. You let me know you love me. I am worthy. I am good enough. Like I am. But I related to him before I would tell myself, yeah, you are worthy. You are this. You are. Now it's like, no, God loves me. God tells me I am worthy. God is telling me like it's him. And now that I put it into it's him telling me, it gives me more peace. It like, I don't know, it feels different when I do.
That's as I was telling you, it's not only psychological, it's spiritual. I think it's more spiritual than anything. I feel that anything we need healing for, my goodness, we've seen people heal instantaneously from the worst things. Why? Because they surrender and they talk to God. But when you have an inner child that feels lonely, betrayed because of things that it went through, that relationship gets broken. That's why I've always told you, I've always admired you, because you, regardless of what you've been through, you've always had that connection with God. For some reason, God has always been really prominent in your life. And that's not what's normal. What's normal is we go through shit in life and then we become the bully. We hate, how many atheists are doctors because they're like, all this shit that happened to me, right? And that's why beyond the physical, because we know what happens, right? The nervous system, it's pretty crazy. People don't realize, but just you not being told you're loved or being ignored as a child, or if there was emotional, physical abuse, all those other things. First of all, your brain, okay? It stores the childhood trauma and it stores it in the limbic system. So that's the part of the brain that's responsible for emotions and memories. That's why it's easier for a bully to become a bully, because there's this part of their brain, I almost imagine it almost a reptilian. And that's what I'm saying. It's you're a rare oddity that if you were going through all this stuff yourself and then you could be kind to others, wow, that's crazy, because what's happening in the brain, we feel like we need to attack too. The biggest part of the brain is this amygdala, and it's this fight and flight center. It's like a little almond. Once we've gone through inner child wounding, again, even crazy stuff like, for example, in the 80s, there was this doctor who wrote a book on how to raise your children. And in the book, it said that if your baby cries, do not pick up the baby. Let the baby cry, because the baby se va. And in Spanish, they call it embrasalar, I think, don't they?
In Brazil.
Brasilar, something like that. In English, it means basically the baby's going to get addicted to you holding him. That causes so much trauma. because the baby needs to attune to the mother's nervous system. And if the mother, I mean, these mothers, they're just doing the best. I remember my mom used to tell me that. My mom was like, don't pick up the baby too much because he's crying. Now, my mom's mom, because she babysits my niece, she will not even let her scream for a second. She's like grabbing the baby. She's like, no, 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 no. No nos podemos dejar llorar. We can't let them cry. I go, why, mom? She's like, because I saw it on TikTok. That I was like, so when we were growing up, you let us cry. And then you told me to do that to my kids, but now you're not doing it to your grandkids. Okay, as long as the cycle is broken, right? So this doctor was telling them that. So the parents were like, I'm not going to do that. That creates trauma because now the baby's like, well, I can't trust you. I can't trust you, mom. I can't trust the world. So the brain, since that moment already, is storing all of this. And now the amygdala, this fight or flight center, you grow up and you're constantly, why are kids constantly stressed and anxious and just reactive? It's this part of the brain. And then you're talking about the nervous system, dysregulated again, hyperarousal, anxiety. So we do have to take the scientific approach, right? And that's where the Satna practice Kundalini yoga came into play, right? I had to rewire my brain. I had to rewire the amygdala. There's a lot of studies now, like for the veterans, they did this protocol after 8 weeks, and the hippocampus actually regrew in size with the Kundalini meditation, which is and that deserves a Nobel Prize because for how long have doctors told us that once you have brain damage, there's nothing they can do? Where this is literally proving that it's changing. It's called neuroplasticity of the brain. So it doesn't, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't matter how horrible it was, that whatever it is that you want. I understand when I look at someone who's completely unconscious and acting out of their child, I think brain trauma right away, right? Doesn't mean that I allow them to be that way, right? Or that I allow them to step on all over me. It's just, oh shit, they got stuff going on, right? So yes, you take the meditation approach to change that. But I don't know about you. For me, there was a lot of forgiveness work that I had to do. Like a lot of, because a lot of it, like I couldn't forgive myself. It was the weirdest thing. And it wasn't until I started to practice also the Course in Miracles that I was frustrated at first because I'm like, I don't know how to forgive. I'll never be able to forgive. I'm always triggered, you know? And I wanted to quit so many times. And I thought to myself, this is the stupidest shit in the world. No one, I'd rather just continue to be who I used to be, which was a victim. And the more that I did it, the more that I practiced, the more that God just showed me you don't have to know how. You just have to be willing to see things differently. And if you are willing to see things differently, that's you inviting me into your life and I will do the rest for you.
I think I've struggled with that a lot, with forgiveness. And yeah, that's where A Course in Miracles has helped in changing our perspective and be willing. Just be willing. I'm willing, God, to see things differently. I'm willing to forgive. I want to forgive. But realizing it was in order to break these generational cycles, patterns, whatever, they keep repeating itself because it's more than obvious. I think many of us can actually sit down and analyze it really with an open mind. You see the patterns repeating themselves in our lineage, in our family. And just knowing that it was God giving us the opportunity to prepare us to become who we needed to be. And he's giving us the opportunity to actually break those cycles. And he's putting us in these situations so we can learn how to break the pattern to get to the point of forgiveness and just keep ascending and doing better. Unfortunately, sometimes it's hard. I don't know, with people that have gone through so much trauma where they have these huge addictions. Like just talking about it, I feel it. I feel it. That I think that's one of the gifts that God has given me. I just feel everything very intensely since I was a child, and I just didn't know how to respond to that. I was like, God, you try to shut it down, or I just didn't know how to respond to it. But that's where it comes from. And I think having the compassion of understanding that people are biggest Judases, they're responding out of their own level of pain. And unfortunately, that they might not even be ready in this lifetime to heal that. And unfortunately, that's where the boundaries have to come. And maybe it's part of their healing journey. I feel it's part of their healing journey where they have to see, wow, at some point they're gonna have to see it, or maybe they won't. I don't know. To be like, wow, my toxic behavior is so strong that you won't even talk to me. I think at some point they're gonna have to see it, or God's gonna have to show it to them. And if they don't see it, then they weren't meant to see it in this lifetime, then oh well. But I had this conversation with somebody yesterday too. I was like, no, I have to do what's best for me, and that's it. And it's okay. And I could have compassion for people and love for people from far away and just do it that way.
Yeah, that's a huge sign that your inner child is healing because now you're not betraying yourself. That's the whole thing, that when we don't honor our emotions and feelings, we're betraying ourselves. And that's the worst. That's the hardest part for me to forgive myself. I couldn't forgive myself because I was like, you were such a dumbass. Like you were
Yes,
like,
yes.
you know,
That was my problem with forgiveness myself. Like, how did you allow this? How did you allow it? I don't understand. Yeah.
exactly. So yes, it's not easy. And for me, it was not overnight. I've been on I started reading A Course in Miracles in 2008 and I wanted to burn it. And I was like, I don't want to do this because it's so radical. It's the radical teachings of our brother Jesus Christ. Like you said, you want to ascend, you got to create the body for that. You got to release all the grievances. The 144,000 chosen ones it's a frequency, it's a state of consciousness. The kingdom of heaven is not somewhere you go, it's a state of consciousness. And it only happens when you are willing to see things differently. And it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of do overs because many times I was like, F this. I don't want to see things differently. I just want this person to rot or something. You know what I mean? And yes, it's a path less traveled, but I think in the future it will be the most common path. I feel that we are definitely pioneers because remember, our brother Jesus Christ was a pioneer. He was a radical. They killed him for trying to bring unconditional love to the world. Like, what the hell? You know what I mean? And for saying that God is inside of you. So, yeah, you are going to piss a lot of people off doing the healing work. You are going to, especially your family, because the thought is, what does she think she is? Her and I came from the same place. All these different things. The one thing I know to be true is that the more healing that I did, the more inner child healing that I did, the more my throat chakra opened, the more I could care less what people think because the reason that I'm doing the things that I'm doing is not for approval or for being held on this specialness or chasing fame, which was my problem back in the day. Believe me, when my inner child was broken, I wanted the whole world to see what I was doing. I wanted my parents to see what I was doing. So because I did that healing part now, I don't care. I don't care about negative comments or positive comments because I'm not for everyone and that's okay. There's a lot of people that are not for me and I just don't listen to them either. But that's absolutely powerful to be able to live that way, to not feel that you need approval is directly correlated to healing your inner child. Don't you think?
Yes, because you're being true to yourself.
Exactly.
We're being true to ourselves. And as long as we're standing in a place of a good heart and you're meaning well, then we're not going to please everybody, unfortunately, or they're going to feel attacked or they're going to feel threatened or they feel whatever they feel at the time. But we have to be true to ourselves and speak our voice and just keep doing what we're doing to heal for our lineage, for our kids, for our grandkids, whoever comes after us. It's necessary. It's time for sure.
Yes, especially because this touches all aspects of your life, your money, your business, your personal relationships. Without a healed inner child, you will always come up short, whether it's in business, the conflicts you have with partners, with employees. I swear to you, God, like sometimes when I was in real estate, I would go into these meetings, and believe me, it's in the spiritual community too, in the wellness centers too, and all that. But like, I would go to these meetings as being part of the boards, and I swear to God, I was like being in a meeting with 5-year-olds. That's what it was. So I was so frustrated. But it was all my inner child too, because I was frustrated. So God put me there to purpose. The world is sadly feels like it's being ran by hurt inner children. That doesn't give us an excuse to do this. I think the first step toward all of this is what you have been talking about, which is, look, we just need a little bit of awareness. Okay. You are the way you are for a reason. You are, everything is healable though. If you have high levels of anxiety or depression, if you have constant toxic relationship addiction, right? I can assure you that it stems from something in childhood. I can assure you that it stems with something generationally. So you gotta give yourself permission. Hey, you know what? There's some healing to be done here. And that for me was a pivotal moment when I finally said, I gotta work on me because all these other people that I've been trying to change and work on to bypass what was really happening in here, that's not working.
Yeah, exactly. Completely agree.
So, what would you say are like the top two things for someone who right now is listening and saying, you know what, I might have these little things that are coming up from my childhood? What are like one or two things that they should start to begin their healing journey?
I think the first one would be to feel. Just sit down and feel what you're feeling. Because many times that's one thing. I know my dad of growing up or whatever, they'd be like, depression's not real. That doesn't exist. That, but there's certain things that my dad won't talk to me about, but he will talk to my sister. And he will tell my sister that he didn't believe in depression and now he does. But he won't tell me that. It's weird. He won't never speak to me about that. But he will bring it up to my sister. We're taught to, like, even in our culture, no lloren, especially men, don't cry. You're not supposed to cry. Why? We need to sit down and actually feel what it is that we're feeling. And I think journaling really helps to just journal your feelings, what is going through your thought process, and then becoming aware. Why am I getting upset? Why am I angry right now? Why is this triggering me? Did this happen? And just really dissecting, where it's coming from, or if it's really logical to be upset or angry at somebody. Because a lot of times it has nothing to do with that person. It has to do with us. We just have to really become aware. And it gets easier to a point where I don't have to do it like before. Before it was just constant dissecting everything that was going through my head or my feelings.
Yeah.
But I needed that to become aware of, what is this coming from? Do I really have a reason to be upset? No, I don't. Okay, then calm down. Just the awareness.
Yeah. Priceless. I couldn't have said it better. I agree with 1,000% everything you said. And little check-ins throughout the day. I know it sounds bizarre and it sounds kind of like a lot of work, but just little check-ins of how are you feeling today? Like putting your hand in your heart. We talked a lot about that house technique and in our community where, you literally are stopping in the middle of the emotion. And that's the hard part because we usually run to numb it with the food, the drugs, the social media, all these other things, and don't feel guilty for doing that. But it takes practice. And as you're feeling in those emotions, like just asking yourself, how am I feeling today? How am I feeling today? Because the inner child is real. She exists within you. She's this purity, this curiosity. And I don't know about you, but the more that I did my healing journey, the more I reverted to childlike living. Me, I'm not naive. I'm not ignorant, but I'm curious now about life. I see God everywhere in the signs, even in the darkness. God is there. And before, I didn't see that. I thought I was completely alone in this world. I thought I had to figure it out by myself. I tried to control every aspect of my life and all the people around it, which then drove to a complete nervous system breakdown where I realized just how little control we actually have. We have physical control in the physical, but we're under God's will. And once I did that, what I realized is that my will aligned more with God. My will trusted God more, and my will showed me that I'm not alone and that I can always go back to speaking to God from within, not from somewhere outside of myself. So yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. It takes practice. It takes, there's no time. Like some of us have healed faster than others, but have we really? I feel like it's all cyclical. Like many times I go back to inner child things, not because God's testing me, but it's just so to close it out, to see how I'm going to respond. It really is about that. It's not a journey that we're trying to simplify because it would be hard for us to give you 5 steps to follow to be able to, the inner child, but it is worth it. And it is 1,000% doable. Whatever you have been through in your life, whatever that is. I know that there are some horrific things that still break my heart that no child should ever have to go through. No child. But if you are sitting here listening to us, two women who have been able to sustain the faith with God, regardless of what life has thrown at us, then I can assure you that you can do it too. Any last words before we close?
I think personally for myself, the more that I've leaned on him, because there was a time where I was very angry at him and I pushed him away. But I think he's brought me back full force and he's shown me that he is here and he always has been. And the more that I'm leaning on him, the more peace that I'm getting, that I feel. So it's up to everybody, but it's been a journey. It's definitely, but he's definitely brought me back.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. I'm sure there will be more things that we talk about around this subject because it all stems from here, all the different things that we go through and generational trauma. So I'm sure we'll bring more topics around this. If any of you have any specific questions about the inner child journey or the inner child healing, feel free to post them below in the comments. We read all your comments and we love to hear suggestions of anything specifically that you yourself are moving through to better assist you. Overall, just thank you for being here with us. I know that this is not necessarily one of those podcast episodes that you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna listen to this for fun," you know? It's but I promise you that this work is incredibly profound and priceless. And by addressing the inner child and the pain that perhaps you have been running from for a long time, one thing that I can tell you to be 1,000% true is that you are breaking a cycle, and not just for yourself, but for future and past generations. So remember that healing is not linear, and that every step you take is an act of love for yourself and for your lineage. Remember that by healing ourselves, we heal 7 generations before and after us. So thank you for being part of our community. Right now, the Sovereign Sisterhood Academy is closed for enrollment, but you can always join us in our free Facebook group community where we also share a weekly life healing session around these topics. I will link it below. And of course, you'll also find the information for Satori. If you are new to the generational healing journey, then this is where you want to start actually to build your vitality. So then you can get into the deeper healing journey in the academy long. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for you. Thank you for sharing this podcast episode and for liking. We value you as a community member and we see you and we honor this path that you have chosen to embark on. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you all again next week. Setna.